Welcome, friends. LostScarf here, and it's time for us to have basically a podcast. Good news is we have an RSS feed again. That link will be in the YouTube description. You can find us anywhere you can find podcasts, so that's pretty cool. Our guest today is known as Smidg3n on Twitter. Name is Micah, and I'll have links to their Twitter and their art portfolio so you can look at it yourself. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, here on this podcast, it's talking to just creatives of different fields and different ways, and you're a digital artist who I've been following for, I think, 3 years, and it's really good art.
Wow, 3 years. Has it really been that long, Cal?
And,
I guess not.
Not really much now, but you started out as like a Sonic fan artist, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, like I was really into Sonic a lot of my young life. Like, well, I'm still young, but
Yeah.
but like very much into middle school and high school, mainly because my brother introduced it to me, and from there I just like, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could draw this? Since I was also like already into drawing, and it just kind of stemmed from there.
Nice. And just real quick, since we're on Sonic, favorite character from Sonic?
You know what? Oh, wait, I know this. Rouge, obviously.
Rouge is great.
Yes.
I think Tails is my boy.
He's a good boy. He's good.
Mm. Who was your favorite to draw when you were doing Sonic fan art? Is it Rouge?
Definitely like later on. It was Shadow. This isn't really a surprise because like I think everybody kind of was influenced by him. But when I was really young and started drawing, like when I first started making like fan characters or whatever, I drew him a lot in comics. I have this like, if it's still even held together, I have this old little like, uh, line book notebook that is probably at my mom's storage unit that has like all the old pen drawings of like my old fan character, which you can say pretty much was the stem that broke out to my original characters now. But I mentioned this before we started, but my fan character was actually inspired by Tails very early on, and it just kind of developed from there.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
And then
oh
sorry.
you were saying?
Oh, and then I just like I said, I just drew a lot of comics with them in Shadow, just like as a ship, basically. It was cheesy, but it was something that I enjoyed.
I feel like that's what everyone when they're younger does. They ship their own characters, or they'll ship characters together, or themselves with characters, things like that, depending on the whatever the thing they're a fan of. That's what a Mary Sue is, after all, when I think about it. So Shadow, then. So you started around being a fan of Sonic around the Sonic Adventure era, then, or?
I'd say a little bit later. I was probably I was I think still 3 to 4 when that came out.
Oh, okay.
I think I first started getting into it in like around 2008. That was actually when I first started getting into video games because my parents they got me and my brother an Xbox 360 for Christmas. And before that, my brother would sometimes let me play with his PS2. And I would play games like Jack and Daxter, Simpsons Hit and Run, DDR, of course.
DDR, oh geez.
And then let me see. But yeah, then around the 2008 era was when I started getting into it more because I started like watching TV a lot more, and I saw commercials for video games. The first commercial I saw for like Sonic that really reeled me in though was Sonic Unleashed. You can ask like literally any of my friends; I will like annihilate you with how that is like my favorite game. At least, and it's like it's natural because like I'm biased since it was my first Sonic game.
Hmm.
Well, technically not the first Sonic game, but the first console game. My first one was obviously the one that my brother showed me on his little Game Boy Color. Um, Sonic 2, I think. Um,
Hmm.
and then when I told my parents about it, they were like, "Oh, here," and they got me a DS, and they actually got me Sonic Rush Adventure. Um,
Wow.
and I didn't know at the time that that was a sequel to Sonic Rush either, so I just kind of went along with it. But I still really enjoyed that game too. It was a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we'll probably touch back on games later, but just moving to another area. So
Mhm.
digital art. So you've been doing digital for how long?
Let's see. I believe I got my first tablet in 2012. That was when I was like starting to get onto the internet more. I started getting onto like DeviantArt more. There was like art tutorial websites that I would go on, and I didn't realize at the time that um, digital arts were drawing tablets were how people were making these like art pieces, and so
Hmm.
thought it was really cool. And then I found out about them, and I would not stop bugging my parents about it. I was kind of a brat with that kind of stuff. If you haven't picked that up.
Hmm.
um, but my grandparents gave me a Wacom bamboo, as my first tablet, and I
Wow.
just used the hell out of it. Um, I I used that one for quite a while. That one like lasted me a good few years. And then I believe I got a Cintiq my last year of high school because I got a job and I was able to save up for one. Um, but it was one of the older models since Wacom they love to make their tablets the price of cars.
Yes, they
Um,
do. That they do. Whew.
mhm. But yeah, I've been drawing since I've been drawing a little bit before then though. I started like digital drawing in 2012. From here to now, it's almost been 10 years for me. Um, and like I say that like it definitely was elongated. Like it was really interesting to see like and look back over the years how like your art progresses in more ways than one.
Hmm.
Because when I look back, it sometimes I see me improving with like color theory and like shading because I remember, the classic shading with black or like gray, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
or like if you're real normie like me, you would just go into Photoshop and use the dodge and burn tools. um and then like, getting better with anatomy, getting better with this and that. It's just really interesting to see. Um and it gives you a pat on the back, but it also reassures you that like drawing takes time. I'm still looking on ways to improve even today, and I just feel like everybody should just for like themselves and their skill. If this is something that they want to progress with, especially like at a professional level.
So then, what software do you use?
I primarily use Clip Studio Paint.
Hmm.
I bounce back and forth between my laptop and my iPad. So sometimes not only will I use that, but I'll also use Procreate. Um, I tend to lean a little bit more towards Clip Studio, though. I think even though on the iPad there's like a subscription fee thingy. Um, I think it's just because I like the interface better. With Procreate, it's very simplified, and even though I like that, there's just like a lot of tools that I wish that were like still easily seen at the hands of everything like with Clip Studio.
And, Procreate. That's is it Apple only? I think that one is.
Uh,
Or
yes,
okay.
I'm pretty sure. Because I think it's only available on like iPads and like iPhones or whatever. Those of the sort. Uh,
Okay.
but yeah, it's only like $10 too. So like, uh,
Wow.
if Procreate wants to sponsor us, uh, um, but I like it. It's also really cool because like it's one of those art programs that is also very preloaded with brushes,
Hmm.
and like I appreciate that because unlike the myth that like brushes don't make you better, at art. They do. They are very helpful. Um, I remember when at one point in my life when I was working on art, I felt kind of like, I guess, not like a phony, but like I felt like it wasn't, real when I was like using the brushes and everything at the time. I'm just like, I want to draw this hand by hand because then I'll be a real artist. And if I could
Hmm.
go down like to 15-year-old me and just like smack them and be like, shut up, use these brushes. I would. Because it's much more helpful than, it makes it to be. And honestly, from what I've noticed with a lot of other professional artists is that they use them too. And it's not something phony or fake or whatever. It's a tool. It's supposed to help you.
Yeah, I've been wrestling that myself, and I think it might be that's just a layman understanding or romanticization of art, I suppose,
Mhm.
where you have to do every single stroke, or just I don't know, like you have to do it like a classic painting. When it's digital art, you shouldn't be doing it like a classic painting.
So on the topic of digital art, as a whole, I remember when I was believe it was also my senior year of high school. I was in drama club, so we were in a lot of plays and shows, and sometimes I would bring my Cintiq backstage just to work on art, like when I was bored if I didn't have any homework.
Hmm.
One time I was just doodling on it, like still getting used to it, and one of my stage crew members walked by and noticed, and she's like, "Oh, what are you drawing?" and everything. I'm like, "Oh, I'm just drawing this and everything." And she's like, "Wow, cool. I think digital art's kind of cheating, but I think it's really cool anyways." And I like just sat there, and I was just like, "What?"
Wow.
And the even more ironic thing is that this person, we had like a little award show at the end of the year for seniors and everything. They won an award for art for the art program with their watercolor painting, and I was just like, so this is how it's gonna be, huh? And I'm like, I mean, no hate towards that. Like, if they're good at watercolors, fine, that's cool. Because honestly, I had a phase where I also tried watercolors, and I don't think I have the patience for it.
Hmm.
um, but like, it kind of like still like boggles me that like even when this is made at like a professional level, like when video games use it, when TVs use it, when or TV shows, producers and everything use digital art, that's still like magnified as like cheating. And just because like you have more tools that can help you out. Now I definitely understand flexibility. Like you should definitely like if you want to like really I guess become like ultimate artists or whatever, definitely like switch back and forth from like traditional methods from time to time.
Hmm.
Because like, you're not always gonna have, a tablet or like um, you know, s- uh, like an iPad or whatever. As like and also, sometimes some people aren't as privileged to have one. It's
Yeah.
like they're pretty expensive, like especially with like the new stuff that's coming out. But like even if you do, like it's not hard. It's not cheating or anything for just drawing. but but yeah, that's something that I've always like thought about. I was just like, man, like obviously it's something I don't like hold tightly to my chest, but I just like kind of laugh at that. It's just like, wow. But yeah.
Huh. Yeah, because I wrestle that like with shading. I'll do all the
Mm,
shading myself with all the colors and everything, and then like, well, I could just use a gradient, and I wonder to myself, am I cheating myself or not? But if I'm learning it, then I don't know. If you're
mm,
also learning it, then you just have more ways to do it, I guess, because maybe sometimes the tool won't work, and then you do have to do it by hand or something.
hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
I
like
don't know.
I think that like it's important to I feel like learning how to draw firsthand, like you should definitely try it uh like traditionally first. I just think that like just so you have like the basic like not only like concepts and like structure of how to like draw down, but like it also people don't like think about it, but it also takes like certain reflexes. in your hand and like in your wrists and everything, and it can also like that's why some artists wear a wrist brace or something
Hmm.
because and I'm actually also looking for one. I'm because I've been drawing a lot lately, but sometimes with how you make motions with your wrists with drawing, it can lead to a higher chance of getting to carpal tunnel.
Oh.
Um, and a lot of that can stem from when you're a beginning artist. Typically, when you're beginning, you make a lot more shorter strokes. Because I remember when I did that too. When I first started drawing, they look kind of wispy and all that. And like you're just using primarily like your wrist. Um, I've noticed like as you like progress and study more and everything, you use more of like your whole arm rather than your wrist. Um, so that's also a thing that's like I think that's important to like get down first before like even if you do pursue like digital art and all that.
Hmm. Okay. Hmm. Just wondering then. How to word? No, I'm probably gonna word this wrong. Like, is it ableist to look down on tools?
I don't I think so. Like I mean cuz like not everybody, can reciprocate um the same type of like practices like the same type of tutorials the same way. Like
Hmm.
some people don't reciprocate it the same way. Like um one thing to mention that I was just recently this year diagnosed with ADHD,
Oh.
and I have an attentive type, which basically means that I have a hard time focusing um on like basically tasks that in TLDR terms that bore me or just like are not as interesting to me. But like in long term, it's basically like when you aren't like basically. I don't want to butcher this. I'm just like trying to find the best way to describe it. Just like tasks that are like long with the process and like take a lots of processing and all that. Um, that's what you focus harder with or like have a little bit more of a hard time with when it comes to an attentive type. Um, when I was looking at uh tutorials and like speed paints or whatever, when I was younger to like kind of um like get ideas and like get how some people draw. I highly recommend that. Please watch speed paints. Please watch tutorials.
I love watching those.
They're like not only are they like nice and helpful, but they're just also like relaxing, and I feel like there's kind of a therapeutic aspect to that. But aside from that, there would be times where I would like, you know, along the process when I would try to like practice or something, I would notice I would accidentally missed a step or like I like didn't process a certain type of uh step that they did or like, movement or just basically like skill or not skill. What's the word? Pardon me. I guess just like addition that they made.
Okay.
Um And I was like, "How did I miss that?" And this was more than just art. This happened with, like, everyday things. Like, I would be
Hmm.
like, "I thought I said that," or "I thought I said this," or "I thought I said that." It was so, like, bizarre to like well, it wasn't bizarre. It was so bizarre to me that, like, I was, like, missing these seemingly obvious things, but it was so, like, eye-opening and reassuring when I got diagnosed that that was the reason for it. And so when people are like, "You need tools to make you a better artist," or something, I'm just like, don't try to play high horse with that because, like, you don't really know what people could be struggling with. And I don't think that when people say that, they're intending to be ableistic. However, they don't realize that they can be unintentionally. Um, when you like think about these things more and like remember that not everybody is, neurologically competent um in certain areas or like they are or they're just like struggling. That you like don't like when you don't Pardon me, I lost my train of thought. When you think about those things more, you become less you become more empathetic, and like
Hmm.
you say, like, I feel like those kind of thoughts or like statements would decrease because like you realize that might not be the right thing to say to somebody who's genuinely looking for help.
Yeah, I do think ableism is usually like absent-mindedly said, like they don't realize.
Hmm. I agree, because like most of our society still is very ableistic.
Hmm.
Lately I've been actually this past couple quarters, I've been taking some classes in my uni that have been focusing on aspects like that, which is why I've like kind of made it more central in my mind to think about. Um, Both classes have been they've been for my major in psychology, which are right now I'm taking body image, yeah,
Huh.
and last quarter I took sexual identities, which is talking about identities and like your identity when it comes to sexuality and gender and stuff like that. And a lot of the things that we discussed were included discussion about how disabled people may feel, or like the discussion of the disabled community, um, among other things. And it was really interesting, and I thought it was really good to that my professor included this, since this isn't really talked about. Like, it's not really something that's, I mean, if you look through like a magazine, from now through like probably the last 5 years, you probably won't see like a model who has like who's in like a wheelchair, or like um who may have Tourette's or something like that, because like again, it's like not seemingly quote unquote as fit for these type of jobs or this type of like public image still.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a wheelchair besides for like advertisements. I think for
Mm.
wheelchairs
Yeah.
or insurance. Hmm.
Hmm.
So psychology then. So what year are you now?
It's weird because I'm taking summer quarter. Right now I'm technically just about a senior. Um,
Hmm.
because I'm planning to graduate by next summer. Um, I'm one of those little annoying like students like, well, technically I'm a senior, but I'm a junior, and it's mainly because when the one well, not to be too open, but I accidentally failed. Well, I didn't accidentally. I failed
Ooh.
biology,
Oh.
and
Ooh.
I also
Failed my wheelhouse.
I had to retake statistics. That was fun.
Oh.
Anyone who is also majoring psych or anything that involves statistics, they know the struggle. Um,
Yeah, I remember that time.
but thankfully, those are out of the way. Another thing is also when this whole pandemic started. Um, I was a bit overwhelmed with my classes for spring quarter, and one of them I actually ended up dropping because I wasn't used to like the new changes of being
Hmm.
inside all the time for classes. Like a lot of people have like the advantage of having all this free time for class and like doing at home schoolwork, but for a lot of us, especially like people who are neurodivergent like me, with inattentive ADHD, very, very hard. um, because like I've literally like spent, like there's been times where I like want to do my schoolwork and like need to do it and know I need to do it, but I will not. Like I just will sit and stare and like, just not do it. It's very hard, and it's like, excuse me. Like it's so crazy cuz like that's like not everybody has this problem, and like it's hard to explain to them what this problem is because obviously not doing it it's more than just saying I don't want to do it. It's like I just yeah. um but that's been a thing that I've been dealing with. I feel like I've been getting a little bit better with it since this will now kind of be the new reality for the rest of the year, but
Mm.
it's still been a pretty difficult thing to manage.
Oh yeah, like the advantage to physical classroom is, well, you got nowhere else to go now. You're stuck there.
Yep. Doesn't help that my apartment's pretty small too.
Yeah. Oof. Just
Mhm.
remembering those times.
Oh yeah.
Um, okay, I'm actually curious about statistics real quick. Was it just doing like bell curves and all that stuff, or did you actually do a lot any analyzing of the bullshit of
Uh,
statistics? Just I'm curious
so
on that
like
part.
I can't really remember because I remember the first teacher I had. No offense to her, but she was kind of bad. Um, but it was mainly bell curves with her.
Hmm.
Um, the second teacher I had though, she we kind of did more real life examples. And like we didn't really apply anything to like the major since like obviously everybody here had different majors.
Hmm.
But I do remember like doing like I think there was one that was like a fishing exercise or something. Um, there was another aside from bell curves, there was another topic that we went over. It was what was it? It was oh, it was the conditional statements because those killed me. Because
Hmm.
like fun fact, me and we're roping into this. Me and our friends Talon and Steph and Mitchie, we were wondering what this phrase was the other day, and it was driving us nuts. Um, until like someone said on Twitter, and I'm like, that's what it was. uh, but yeah, it was just a lot of that mainly, and I felt a lot better the second time I took it because even though I had a hard time with the first class, um, both because of the teacher and just because of understanding um the course. Uh, the the second time felt a lot more fluid, and I was just like, I got this, I got this, I got this. So that was reassuring.
Cool. Like for me, it was here's all the boring stuff. We'll do a little bit of this, and there's like now we're just gonna do a bunch of cases of BS. Like, what's the BS here? What's the BS there? I found that fun because it was like a kind of like a puzzle or a riddle kind of thing. Like
Hmm.
it was like, how are they BSing us with statistics? Like it was a lot of just understanding the BS so that you could actually argue around it or against it because people BS statistics a lot.
Oh yeah.
Like for me, psychology, I only had to take a little bit of it, and it was a lot of just direct brain stuff.
Oh yeah. Like that's what you'll talk about in Psych 101 at the beginning, definitely.
Yeah, so like Phineus Gage, of course, always gets covered.
Oh man.
That one's such a rough story to hear, though.
It
Th-
is.
Those who don't know Phineus Gage, he got like a metal spike through his head, survived it, but he was a completely different man. He was way more angry and aggressive with people than he was before,
Mhm.
and it's because I think his inhibitions got destroyed, basically.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like just when after someone has a stroke, where they just lose the ability to inhibit their more aggressive behavior.
Right. It's really interesting to me because like um there was a case. There was someone I knew. I'm not gonna say names, but
Hmm.
people who know me probably know who this is. So whoops. But there was someone I knew that like I was friends with for a bit, but then that kind of diverged. Um, they had gotten into an accident, like I believe it was a car accident or something, and they apparently they just like from word of witness of other people, they became like more aggressive, much more like not hostile, but like
Hmm.
just assertive. And like I don't want to confuse aggression with assertion because those two are completely different. They're similar but like different in intent. But and I was just like realizing one day, I'm like, wait a minute. This is the exact same thing that happened with Phineas Gage because where it happened on them was like their frontal lobe area. And your frontal lobe is like the number one area for like your emotions and like your awareness of that.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting just to like see. multiple accounts of this kind of thing happen because it just proves it's true, and it's just like, wow, science is weird. But yeah. Have you ever heard of the I think one of my favorite experience or experiments to bring up lately is the Zimbardo experiment. Have you ever heard of that one?
I know I've heard it, but at this point it's been so long. So which one? What's
Mhm.
that one?
So the Zimbardo one is where Philip Zimbardo, I believe that's his name, um conducted an experiment with a bunch of men. They took them to a prison, and what they basically did is that they role played
Oh,
the
this one. Okay.
identities, yeah, of
Mhm.
cops and prisoners. And it got so extreme to the point where with the people who were role playing the cops that they like had to cut the experiment early because these like people were like legit abusing like the um the cellmates and like the prisoners. And I just think that's really interesting, especially referring to it now, like in the time period that we're living in, because it's just like it makes you think about people who are cops who like sign up for their role of duty, like what their intention is. Like, you say like not to get a little political if
Yeah.
that's too much here. But like you say that there's like all cops, not all cops are bad cops, but you you look at an experiment like that and think that people who don't know who think what a cop is just try to replicate it, and that's the outcome of that. So what do you think about when the people who are cops, like, what did they think when they first signed up the role? Now, obviously, there's definitely some people who, um, like, their intent was just like, I want to help the world. I want to help the,
Mhm.
people. I want to help society, which is very good in nature because, like, anyone who does want to do that is, definitely good minded. But then when you come with how the system of it works, with how, like, I forgot what the term of these are, but like not tickets, but just like the little like amount of amount per day that they have to assign for each like precinct or whatever for cops. You think about that and it's just like why would you it's more than just like even people wanting to be good or bad. It's just the whole like system of it that just shows how like badly structured it is. So,
Hmm. I think there's two
sorry.
things there. One thing there is the suit makes the man kind of thing, or like the person becomes the character. Like they become what they think it is, I suppose. Like yeah, those guys. This is what they thought cops were, so they did that stuff, which wasn't great. Another one is, I suppose, a superiority complex as well, or like,
Oh, yeah.
or moral high ground. But like, by being a cop by default, they think they have moral high ground, so that lets them do some things. Like it in a way takes away some inhibitions because they're like, well, I got authority, so I can do what I want, kind of thing. But we
There was
have
this Oh, you can go ahead.
because we have cases of where people become something that they're just faking because they've just done it so much they become that thing.
Mhm,
Like a celebrated example would be Andrew Dice Clay. He's this comedian. He was a very, very liberal comedian, and he did
mhm,
characters. And a character that really worked out was Andrew Dice Clay, which is this very aggressive kind of, I'm going to say it wrong, like kind of like jockey, kind of on more on the right side kind of things. And he just
mhm.
became that person eventually, and he noticed it too. But now he's
Wow.
just who that is. So just
Wow,
being a character, you become that character eventually, just because well, you're in that mindset.
mhm. Wow, that's incredible. I never even heard about that guy.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, there was a quote that I saw on Twitter like a month or two back. God, it's hard to believe this was already 2 months ago. um, but it was talking about respect, and there's two different types of respect when it comes to like authority and human rights. Some people mean respect with I'll treat you with respect like as an authority figure, and some people mean respect with I'll teach you like a human being with basic respect.
Hmm.
And the but sometimes when you hear the quote. if you don't treat me with respect, I won't respect you. And what that can sometimes be translated to is if you don't treat me like an authority, I won't treat you like a human being. And then it
Huh,
circled into the film of the NYPD, the main police chief saying, "You guys better respect us, or we'll, not, you know, listen to you or whatever." Basically, so it's like,
not great.
interesting.
Yeah, this is it's not a great situation. Really
No.
not. It's a bad situation. It's still happening too, of course. Like uh, it's anything that involves humans is going to be very flawed. I think at the end of the day.
Yeah, like I mean, humans are naturally flawed, and like there's nothing wrong with that. However, what's wrong with that as this whole thing as a whole is not only like the imperfection of how humans react, but also just the system. Like
Hmm.
the first police chiefs were like one of them was in Boston, since that was primarily where the population was. But down in the South, they were slave owners, and they would just be watching at night for slaves that
Oh.
either got loose or something like that. So that's where that erupted from. And so, you can't really like reform or, like fix a system that's reliant on that. There has to just be either complete eradication of it or just like, you know, change. Like, well, I guess you can reform it, but like in a sense that's like this needs to be removed, this needs to change, this needs to be different from what it's rooted from. We need a different root from this. So,
It's really weird how dismissive people are about racial things, and that America itself has had slavery longer than it's had freedom for
yeah.
African Americans. We actually have a recording of one of the last slaves. They got all the way to like 90 something, and they got a recording of them in like 1890 or 1910 before they
Mhm,
passed. So we actually have
mhm,
perspective of a former slave on things.
mhm.
And so yeah, slavery was only like 4 people ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago, so it's not like it's all gone. We're not that old a country at the end of the day.
I
So
think one of the things
mm,
that is like really interesting about that is how people like the reaction to when people post pictures of like MLK and everything, especially like in black and white, and it's like those pictures are like in color. Like
yeah,
that's how recent this is. Like MLK's daughter is still alive and she's on Twitter telling people like who try to rephrase his speeches, you know,
mhm.
shut up.
Like that's not what my dad was saying. Come on,
hmm
it's it's an interesting. It's always been an interesting time, I suppose. It's a rough time. I don't like we're both minorities, so we have a different perspective on it than some other people will have, of course.
hmm Yeah, I definitely think by being biracial has like, affected it. I used to think like when I was younger that I was a special kind of different because I was not only black, but I was white too.
Hmm.
And, it was just like, oh, cool, I'm two things. I guess that means I'm cool, I guess. Um, and like I didn't really like my mom was very good though about teaching me black heritage and black culture. Even if I was like, oh, I watch Borg documentaries and all that, like she still made the effort like to teach me about these things because it's important. And like it's important for my identity that I know just as well because as far as like my white side, there's not really much else other than, Midwest and stuff. Um
Yeah.
and like as I've grown and like especially within my recent years, I've like resonated more with my black identity mainly because I've stuck with my mom more. My dad and I unfortunately we don't talk anymore because of just the relationship we've had. My dad was pretty borderline abusive to me and my family.
Hmm.
Not like physically, but unfortunately, at one point, it came to that with me. Um, Only once though. Sorry for, by the way, trigger warning. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
sorry. We never like. He's tried to contact me a couple times since then, but excuse me. Um, but I've blown it off. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to take part of it. But it was at one point last year where it was almost 2 years since I hadn't talked to him, where he decided it was a good idea to make a big blog post about why he was such a terrible dad, but in like a sarcastic light. And one of the things that he included in this article was how he mentioned that his kids have identified as black, and it's like, well, aren't we black? Like when you think of things like the one drop rule, we would identify as black because in the end that's what we were. And it's like it's crazy that even it's crazy that even the people you're biologically related to don't see you as what your makeup it as because they want to see you as something else in their image. And that's one of the things that I think caused the greatest disconnect from me and my dad because he didn't also not only choose to not listen to me, but he also decided to not agree with my culture, even though that was something that I was proud of and, that I didn't care I was mixed with because it's important to me. Um, and when it comes to times like this, I think it's very important for people like me to speak out about it because in the end, though, I'm still privileged. Even though I am black in a technical sense, I'm also half white. I'm light skinned. I'm uh what the hot phrase has been called white passing, where basically you look like as if you can be a white person.
Huh.
And it's important because a lot of people of color, especially dark skinned black people, they get blown off. Like one of the things that happened recently, especially in the art community, was how a lot of talented black people, black artists, were participating participating in hashtags like for black artists and black careers and everything, but they got blown off for it. And barely any studios, if any, none at all, contacted them or followed up with contact with messages. And I think that's important to bring up because, especially from someone like me, because people who do see me as someone as quote unquote a representative of someone who's black need to know that I'm not the only one.
Hmm.
Like I'm not um that seems like a crazy assumption, but you'd be surprised at how many people would I mean, it's shown in media that a lot of TV and shows still consider people like me as, what a black person is. And that's not true. Cuz even though I am black, I'm not black. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Uh, it gets weird trying to narrow down any race or culture anyway to
Mhm.
one representative.
It's very complicated, I agree. Yeah. It's just but it wouldn't be as complicated if so many other people especially white people weren't afraid to talk about it. Um
True.
but yeah.
Every every racial conversation I've had with white people gets turned around into well, I'm not them trying to make it about, I'll say, reverse racism, or how they're not racist, I guess. Which it's not about them. It's about the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Mhm.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, moving towards. Hmm. Actually, I want to talk about psychology some more.
Okay.
Just because there are some interesting. Do you know about the monster study?
The monster study. I don't believe so.
Yeah, I might get this wrong, mixed up with a different one. It's the same guy for both. But
Mhm,
it's one of the monster study is it's either the one where this guy had a mumbling problem,
mhm,
and so he got a bunch of kids, and some didn't have a mumbling problem, some had a mumbling problem,
mhm.
and so he'd do like positive reinforcement, and it would help with mumbling. But he'd also do negative reinforcement, and it made kids who mumbled mumble more, and it made kids who never mumbled before become mumblers.
Oh, wow.
And
I don't think I've
so
heard of this one.
that's either that one's a monster study or the other one. I'll see the other one, but yeah, it was this. So he just made just kids into mumblers, which is very not great.
Ugh.
Uh, the other one, which it might be that one, is he made children scared of rabbits.
Oh, that's the Rainier study. I know
Okay,
that
okay.
one.
And it's like,
Wait,
jeez.
little baby Albert.
Oh yes, there it is. Yeah, a little baby Robert.
Mhm.
So not great. uh, studies can be used for good and for horrible. I just
No,
wanted to
yeah,
bring it
it
up
makes.
since we're talking about it.
Oh no, I got you. No, yeah, like I think it's like interesting that more people don't take these like studies into account, especially when like raising children. Um, like I would see like those little whatever clout chasing posts, either clout chasing for like negativity on purpose or like just because they're dumb, but it would be like when someone's trying to feed their kid and they won't eat it, and then they just take like a stuffed animal or like doll or something and like beat it or like relentlessly, and then they feed like when they would try to feed it and they would reject it. Um, and so when they would try to feed them again, the kid would naturally like eat it, and it's like it, you're first of all, you're a terrible parent, and I'm very concerned for your child. Second off, like people are like it's so like staggering how many people like still use the it's a joke or it's not real or it's like you guys are so offended. It's like no,
Yeah, I hate that.
these are actually like studies that relate to these things, and it makes me frustrated that these things aren't like these studies aren't publicized
Hmm.
more for that reason because I feel like a lot of children would not have the those kind of problems as much if they were. Um, because I mean, like, you would want the like. There's been a lot of like, oh, kids don't had the struggle as I did and everything, or my kids didn't have the same struggle I did. It's like, well, wouldn't you not want your kids to struggle like you did though?
Yeah,
Like, isn't that the point of being a parent? Like, that was something that resonated with my dad a lot. He was the type of, why did my kids have it better than I did as a kid kind of thing.
like is that what you
Like
want?
yeah, like I remember one time me and my mom were doing something. I think we were like watching TV or like and she was like doing my hair or something like that. And he walked in and he's just like, "You're so spoiled." And I'm like, "For my mom doing my hair?" uh,
Wow.
like I don't remember if it was exactly that, but it was something like so benign that like, obviously both me and my mom looked at him like, "Uh, okay." Um but yeah, and so I feel like a lot of kids there would be a lot less kids who have developmental issues, who have, social issues with that and like in that regard, like a lot of those problems would not as be as robust because these studies would be more publicized. But, you know, people just like cloud, I guess.
I think the problem with because like child development really concerns me a lot because I have
Mhm,
like a niece and a nephew and I got to watch them develop and I got to see them. They're
mhm.
not the best children, and but I got to see how they were raised and it wasn't the best either.
Oh.
So using examples like how I'd like to raise my children, uh, better. But child development is very concerning. But I think the problem is everyone thinks they know their child, so they think they're the expert of their child, whether they know anything or not. Is part of the
Mm,
problem.
mhm,
That or it's just the whole mindset of this was how my upbringing was. That's how their upbringing is gonna be. Instead of trying to make it better, it's just they're gonna have the same experience I had.
mhm.
Because I guess in a way that would be if you do it a different way, then there's then you're making it that you weren't a great child, or maybe your parents weren't great at raising you, or something. I don't know. There's a lot of things to unwrap there, I suppose.
Mhm.
But like having babysat raised my niece a bit, I got to see where a soft hand works and where a more firm hand definitely works. Especially if sometimes they just sometimes one thing works, one thing doesn't. I guess.
Mhm.
But
No, y
like my niece has she can't focus very well and she's really bad at learning things. She's 9 now,
Mhm.
and this and so seeing her concerns me for children in general because she didn't learn a dang thing from online learning. So I'm really concerned for just children in general because of that, because it requires a parent to have a kid on task, I think, when it comes to that. Like, the teacher's there to keep a kid on task. Now it's a parent has to do it, because you just leave a kid with a laptop, that might not go anywhere.
Mhm. Yeah, and I get that, like I get that's why one of the concerns for opening schools this fall is a valid concern. Because I mean, some people do have to, some people don't know what they can do with their kid, mainly because of their what responsibilities they already have.
Yeah.
And, like, they legitimately are concerned for, what their children will do or how they'll learn because, they're not there to help them or they'll, flub up their schedule, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because, like, you know, in the end, this whole thing screwed all of us over.
Yes, it did.
So, we weren't to know anything. We weren't to expect anything. Um, but I mean, it's still just like a concern. Like, it's still not good to open up schools because I mean,
Yeah.
it's already been showing that the few schools that have been opening up have had rocketing cases, uh, or cases rocketing up. Um, And that concerns me because, like, kids are probably like, it's not because of kids getting it, but because they're probably going to be asymptomatic
Mm.
and bring that to, like, teachers or the parents or relatives and stuff like that. So, that's another concern. But, um, rolling back to, what we were originally talking about, yeah, like, God, my mom, when she found out that I had ADHD,
Mm.
she was generally a bit hesitant to it first, and kind of like how you were talking about, like that whole "I know my child" thing.
Mm.
Uh, my sister, she got diagnosed before me, and she was also like a little bit. She kind of just like blew it off, like not in a bad way, but she's like, "Oh well, she has ADHD," and like didn't really like harness what that meant.
Mm.
And when I was growing up, especially in high school, I noticed that like my grades were getting or my GPA was getting lower as I got on, and I thought that just meant, oh, I'm getting stupid. um, and like we got to the point where my parents would argue. Like I remember, my parents separated in the middle of my high school uh, time, and
Mm.
at one point, my senior year, when I was going over to dad's for the weekend, he like literally when we opened the door he like held my grades in front of me and was like, if your grades aren't better than a C, then you're not going to prom. And I just
Wow.
broke down, and like my mom and I obviously left, but like I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought it was just like this was me, and I didn't realize that like it was just a developmental issue, uh to be later discovered rather than you know this was me. And
Mm.
my mom's a very accepting person, which is why I rely on her and, you know, as my guardian parent. But I could still tell she was nervous to this being revealed to me because I was taking it so seriously. Um, and like she was scared. She was nervous what that meant for me because my psychiatrist did suggest meds for my case. I haven't found settled on one yet. We've been like doing some tests, but um uh otherwise or likewise, we've been doing tests. Um, and my mom's been nervous about that because, like, there is been a lot of cases with like kids who do have ADHD, who do have addiction problems with some of the medicines like Adderall.
Oh,
And I can understand that from what I've learned with psych too, especially with how like, in the early days they would just relentlessly like drug up the kids who they even didn't even confirm that had ADHD
yep,
with Adderall, and it would just turn them into like zombies. And like, this isn't me saying don't take your Adderall to anyone who does
yeah,
rely on it.
yeah.
Please don't think it's that, but like, it's just it's unnerving. Especially to someone who lived in a very abled world before. But thankfully my mom has like even give consideration to getting herself tested. Um because I'll be honest, I don't know where the string of it comes from, if it does, since my sister has it. I believe lead to believe that one of my parents has it, and I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure who that which one it was strung from. Maybe my mom. I think more likely my mom, but based off of my dad's behavior, I kind of have some beliefs that he might have, some type of string like that.
Hmm. From the biology side of things, that's been a question for a while. Is nature versus nurture? Is it in the DNA or is it just in our technological age? What's creating
Oh.
ADHD? And it's also a question that's been asked about autism as well, because of
Mhm.
just how wiring works with autism. The question has been, are we evolving to deal with all the stuff we're getting? And right now, it's an evolutionary phase of misses and hits with autism. Because you have some people with autism who can be brilliant, and people with autism who it doesn't go very well. And so it's been a question of evolution of because of how our technology's been. And there's been a lot of talk in the biology world and the genetic world. What's going on with that?
Oh, definitely. I remember actually, this reminds me of when I was talking with my psychiatrist when I got diagnosed. She mentioned something of how ADHD is a very evolutionary type of illness because,
Hmm.
there has been like a lot more cases of it. And I do think that does have to do with some of technology. And I'm trying to remember what we talked about that day. I'm like, we said something like that was spot on with this discussion, but I can't quite remember what was exactly said. Um, but yeah, like, cause a lot of what we are handed nowadays is like a lot of what not only just with the technology, but with like the social world just goes very fast.
Hmm.
Um, like with trends, with like TV shows, with like just life. Um,
Yeah.
and that can like in hand affect the development of ADHD. But on the other hand, it's tricky to say too because ADHD is also genetic, and so um, it's not that I don't think that the it's not that I think that boo technology bad Thomas Edison was a witch, um, but I do think that there is still a lot to talk about in society when it comes to these developmental issues.
Hmm.
Because in all honesty, like I don't like being Mr. Psychologist Micah, when it comes to like seeing my friends and family and like coworkers and regular people, but you
Mhm.
can really like spot out people and be like, you probably have ADHD or you probably have autism or you probably have this. And like I don't like doing that because it's just such a like it feels so prestigious and like,
Yeah.
you know, high like kind of like what we were talking about earlier, authority ish kind of thing
Mm.
because like you feel like you have a higher claim because you know what someone is dealing with even though they don't know.
Yeah.
um but in the end you don't really know either because it could just be something falling under self-fulfilling prophecy for you too.
Mm.
um
Yeah.
but either way, the whole talk about mental health when in regards to those type of things needs to increase because I mean frankly just shy of like 10, 12 years ago, we only thought ADHD was primarily in like little boys, and here I am, the exact opposite of that. Um, with it, it's not just a thing that happens in boys anymore. It's a thing that can happen to anybody.
Uh, have you found like fidget things helpful at all?
Not really. Like, in fact, I think they kind of like not in for my sake, I mean,
Yeah.
but in my hand, I feel like it's even more distracting for me, um, because it keeps me more preoccupied with something rather than like focused on what I should be doing. Um, I do think they're important though. Like, I feel like when with the fidget spinner thing happened, it was like taken widely out of context. Like, I feel
Hmm.
like a lot of mental health like awareness efforts are like taken widely out of context by modern day society. Um, excuse me. Um, like that as an example. The ASL Ice Bucket Challenge thing, where it was talking about like Gary's disease and how that affects like how it's the ice bucket's supposed to resemble how it feels, I guess, but like people weren't realizing like like people took it more into as a challenge rather than like an awareness thing for the disease.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, like it's stuff like that where I know this is very divergent from the question we asked, but yeah, like I think that those are important and like but it's just like other things in society, they're taken widely out of context because of how, unaware we are still.
I feel like I can guarantee like 90% of people didn't know why the ice bucket thing was a thing. They just thought this is what you do and that we give money to ALS. Like,
Yeah, and it's like I was in high school when this happened. Um and so I don't really blame myself for not really knowing about it then because I didn't really, it wasn't something that I was understanding or would really understand at the time, but I wouldn't not understand it if it wasn't, a topic that we talked about regularly. So I think that's um where that can come into effect.
random fact for just people in general, Adderall. If you
Hmm.
ever wonder how the Asian students get out of college in 3 years, Adderall's the answer to that question.
Have you ever taken Adderall?
I have not. I had classmates who did.
Hmm.
Uh, Chinese classmates who did. They came
Hmm.
here. They wanted to be gone in 3 years, and they took Adderall, and they were just up all night studying. They were either in the common room or just in their room, depending on how the roommate was about things. And yeah, they're still up studying. Still up studying. It was an experience seeing that.
Yeah, I can
Hmm.
imagine. I like it's still so weird to like it's still very new to me to be introduced to medications because like there's been talk about like you don't need this. You can, be fine with that. But in reality, like a
What
lot of
stuff?
people they need it. Like I do agree that I would be someone that would need medication. But the reason why I haven't taken Adderall or resorted to that is because I was also diagnosed with anxiety. Um, and since Adderall is an amphetamine, I feel like that would be really bad on that part.
Oh.
Um, since it's a stimulant,
Hmm.
and so my ADHD would be fine, but I would cry if I saw a fly dive.
Ooh.
So I've been looking specifically for non-stimulant medications for that reason. I have been curious about Adderall, but I feel like that'll just be a last resort,
Hmm.
in case, everything else doesn't work out. Um, because honestly, because I mean, like, I've only been on 2 medications so far. Technically 1 since I haven't started my other one yet, for, medical reasons and all that.
Mhm.
But, yeah, it's just it's hard. It's hard trying out medications, especially, like, you have to get used to a routine with that. And also just how they can like you can have a completely different personality like on meds.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That was I have some experience more with depression.
Hmm.
Uh and I've seen this two ways. With your psychology, so you have some knowledge on depression. For
Mhm.
me, it felt more of like a mental thing. So I never wanted to go to psychiatry. Well, psychiatry would have been smart when it comes to mental, but I never wanted to do meds or any of that stuff. My sister, on the other hand, was purely chemical. She had digestive issues.
Oh,
So
I see what you
because of that, she wasn't getting the correct hormones. I can't remember what it is exactly. She wasn't getting the hormones or the vitamins or minerals, whatever it's needed for chemical balance. So
Yeah,
she
right.
really needed medication for that, like because that's an actual like a medical thing.
Hmm.
Well, for me,
Any
if
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
well for me it felt more like just it was more psychological trauma and things like that that affected me. So I didn't feel like medication was the way to go for me. So it was more 15 years of dealing with depression and getting to a better spot after
Yeah.
that.
No, but I'll drink to that.
Hmm.
No, but yeah, like, it's no joke when people say that, like, we're all like snowflakes, no two are alike, because we do all respond to mental health differently. Like, mental health is more so a spectrum than, it is just black and white.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, even with ADHD, I didn't even realize that there was multiple types of those. Um, there's commonly three different types, which are inattentive, like the one I have, and then there's impulsivity, which is more so the one I think society is more familiar with, aka just like rambunctious boys running around, screaming, yelling, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And then there's the combined type, which is just the two of those. Um, and and also with the thing that people don't remember or don't know so much about mental illness is that it's kind of like buy one get seven free. When I was diagnosed with ADHD, I also was diagnosed with depression and anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, Not severity, thankfully, but uh, still within the guidelines. And so, that's why like certain medications won't, like even the most common ones that work well with certain illnesses won't fly for like certain people.
Hmm.
Because what I've learned most commonly in kind of more pharmaceutical psychology is that um, meds are usually made for people with, especially in depression, for people who have major depressive disorder. Um, Mainly because it just is so heavy on the brain and also just the motor functions. But like you said, it can also be that severe, enough to like affect other parts of your body, where like literally like they shut down,
Hmm.
because you feel this way. And so sometimes people need it for the emotional, uh just the emotional uplifting and like support, but some people do need it for like the physical like component of their lives too.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that like that's how it works usually.
Yeah. It's the brain is a crazy place, and we're still trying to figure it out.
Hmm.
Uh, Back in the day, I was on the. I used to be a neuroscientist, so it was
Hmm.
more the mechanics. I worked on Huntington's, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's, and all three of those things are scary as hell. Because those are well, Huntington's is how to put it. It's there's a protein in your head, and it's getting made too long, and it's clogging up your brain,
Hmm.
and that's why people die from Huntington's young.
Hmm.
Well, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's are more your brain's deteriorating, which scares me.
Hmm.
Um, the department next door is an interesting thing where they doing learning brain the hard way. They have brains and they do a slice and they're putting like electrons to the brains one slice at a time. Like it takes years to get through that. So we're
Hmm.
still so far from understanding brains.
It's so insane. Like that's what I'm so interested about with studying psychology. And the hard thing is I still don't know yet if I will go on to grad school with it.
Hmm.
Um, because although I do like want to make some component of it my career, I also want to like, my art career kind
Hmm.
of take off. Um, but I also like it's part of the reason why that's also like a component of why I am taking it with art is because I want that, knowledge to reflect into whatever I produce or whatever I make. Um it's a dream of mine to someday, like, if you follow my Twitter already, you know I've been screaming about this lately, but it's been a dream of mine, to, like, pilot my own show, more so an adult kind of themed show that, like, isn't, like, satirical or dark or both or like, it's just filled with, like, sex or whatever, but, like, kinda has all that in a lesser degree, but also is more focused on, like, adult themes and like
Yeah.
these kind of things because I think that like, it's just something that I want to try that hasn't really been done from what I've noticed. Um I'm not any expert obviously either. I don't want people to think like I'm a hoity-toity, you know, artist that like thinks that my creation is will be superior. I obviously don't think that, but I do want to make something different that obviously like stands out and like that's a very hard thing to do, and especially when you're like a minority like me. Like I said, I still have some leverage for being white passing, but like it's still, I mean, it also doubles down that I'm a woman, so
Hmm.
that also comes with a price. Um, but um, but yeah, like, and so I want there to be like more obvious cues of those things, like in media, and that's what I want to like create for. Not just because I like it and I love like, creating, but also because I want those like kind of messages to be led on. Um, and like I think a lot of people use this as an example, but like shows like Steven Universe and like uh well, like Steven Universe. I can't really think of any other examples off the top of my head, but like they were more open about like mental health and like
Oh yeah.
talking and communication and like how to solve problems like that are more like conventional and more like not just like your basic you know fight, all that stuff, and that's also what has like inspired me more to want to make something like that out in the world because if that person can do it, if Rebecca Sugar, if a woman could do that, then probably so
Hmm.
can I probably.
Hmm. And, touching on something you're saying, in annoyance with, uh, I guess society is they think adult just means sex.
I think so because like lately it helps that I've been taking a lot of like classes kind of centered around that. There is sex is everywhere in media, and like I don't think sex is a bad thing. I think
Yeah.
sex is important because in the end, like a lot of people, that affects almost everybody. Um, it just depends on what their choices are, and that's that is just as important. But the problem with it right now is, well, for one thing, it's extremely heteronormative.
Yep.
Another thing is it's like it's also extremely westernized, aka just like white people. Um, and so when it comes to like shows that have that, like even whether it's satirical or not, it's still like within those guidelines, and like it doesn't include anything with like multiple genders, multiple ethnicities or races, multiple identities. It's very saturated with the same stuff, and I think sex is important. I think sexual expression is important. Obviously for people that deem it important, not everybody does,
Hmm.
but there there is ways of creating sex positive environments without all that saturation of not only like the westernized and heteronormative standards, but also like the toxic and like the uh yeah, the toxic kind of ones.
Hmm.
Um, because in my last class last semester, uh we took a we watched a video that was about the porn industry and how a lot of it is just run by upper class affluent men.
Hmm.
Um, and like, while that's not necessary, well, it is kind of a problem. It is a problem, but while it's not the main problem at hand, but it's also just like how it's run. Um, it's just it's run too much like a totalitarian business. Like, there
Hmm.
was legitimately a court case where they had to fight for the legalization of using condoms on porn sets. And that lost.
Wow, really?
It was in, and this was in California. This was in
Mhm.
2005, around that time.
Well, okay.
But
Um,
but yeah, it's bleh.
like real quick on that is California, though very blue, is also very red. It's something that
Mhm,
people don't realize is uh, up until Bill Clinton, California voted red nearly every time in the presidency. It's got a lot of conservative people up in it. Uh, Gay marriage was like, all right, we got gay marriage now in like 2004, 2005, 2006, and then got slapped back down like 1 or 2 years later. It got
mm,
repealed. So there's a lot of conservative people here as well. There's just also a couple. There's a little bit more liberal as well.
mm.
So it's almost a purple state. Thankfully not.
So, in Washington, it's kind of the same deal.
Hmm.
Um, we have two different parts of Washington. There is Western Washington, where you see all in the media. That's all you see in the media, like Seattle, Tacoma, which is where I live.
Hmm.
Um, just all the areas like by the water, by the forests and mountains and beaches and everything. Like, but also with like the localization of our cult of like gay marriage and like a lot more self-expression. And then when you get past the mountains, there's Eastern Washington. And that is probably the most like conservative, like like it is probably like just as bad as like as you describe California, if not
Hmm.
maybe worse. There are people, even when you don't even go that far into it, when you get close to it. One of my friends, they live in a place called Enumclaw, which is pretty close to where you get to that line of like leaving Western Washington territory. There are people who like have Confederate flags in front of their houses and like wear that with pride. And
Wow.
like there are people with the like Blue Lives Matter flags, the one with like of the American flag with just the blue stripe.
I hate that
There are
flag.
people, I do too. um like it's just everywhere there. Like,
Wow.
and like people think like Washington may be even a purple state from that matter, because like if you're like if you are any darker than how dark I am, or like even your level of dark, maybe even, you would not want to go that way. It is
Jeez.
not. It's not a. And like, obviously to each their own. But I mean, like, when you're talking about like agreeing with people who are like, yeah, fuck gay marriage, fuck black people, fuck, and I don't know if that's necessarily up for discussion of being agree to disagree.
Yeah.
I think you're kind of a dick.
Yeah, yeah. Whew.
Yeah.
Talking
Mm,
about racial things, here's an
mhm,
interesting one. I feel like the Asian experience is a little different. It's kind of just we're all here, so throw away culture. Uh, not exactly. Like for me, I don't know if I've ever said what my mix is. My mix is Mexican and Filipino. So
mm.
funny thing about Mexicans and Filipinos are they got effed. I got effed from both sides by the Spaniards, basically.
Uh,
Because the Spaniards, they went down to Mexico, and they also went over to the Philippines and basically colonized both, sort of.
mhm.
So there is a chance I just have way more European blood than those two things. There's a chance of
Oh,
that.
no.
But
Yeah.
so for the Filipino side, it very much was we're in America now, so we're gonna do American things. We're Americans. But there was still like the older generation, they still met up at parks and had dances and just cultural stuff. So there were still things like that.
Mhm.
For the Mexican side as well, Mexicans in America, it's been like this for a lot longer than how Filipinos have been. Like, Filipinos came after World War II,
Mhm.
because they helped in World War II. So they came over and they embraced American culture and everything. So I'm like, I'm third generation.
Mhm.
For the Japanese was different because I had some Japanese friends. For them, their culture was completely thrown away. The reason for that was the internment camps.
Mhm.
Their parents and their grandparents, after the internment camps happened, it's just a different experience because the Filipinos were on the side of the Allies. Well, Japan, of course, was in the Axis. So when they got interned and everything, they lost their property and stuff. They threw away their culture. They threw away. So they didn't teach their kids Japanese or anything about Japanese culture. This is what I got from just Japanese friends and coworkers is their parents didn't teach them anything about Japan. Like, the internment camps completely scared the culture out of them, is my understanding. So just the Asian side of things is different. Well, it's also younger. Besides, I would say Chinese because the Chinese have been part of America a lot longer. When you have like the trains and San Francisco and things like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you guys just discussed it, but I know with Marina, me and her have talked about how it's very weird being American mixed.
Yeah.
In her case, she's not Japanese, she's Chinese.
Hmm.
However, I know that from her word that she has talked about how her family adopts to the model minority myth a lot.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, where basically, for those who don't know, model and minority myth is where like you basically adapt to the white culture to be more accepting of them in order to just like you just assimilate like to white people culture basically, just to not like get like radicalized or like you know not treated like a human being because that's eventually what happens when you don't act white.
Yeah.
um, it's like I definitely agree with that because of what Marina have told me, and I know with my family, we are very prominent of Black culture, um, for I mean many various reasons, but obvious just because we're proud of our heritage and like what we've been through as people.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of my family is pretty successful with themselves. Like my grandfather, George Fleming, he was I'm okay with saying his name because you'll know why in a second. He played for the Rose Bowl and for the Washington Huskies
Huh.
twice in the '60s.
Wow.
He even has his own banner at the school that I go to, at the stadium.
Wow.
Um, and my mom, or not only that, but with my grandpa, but he was also part of Washington Senate for a couple of years too.
Mm.
Um, he was a hardworking man. Uh, unfortunately now though he has dementia, and it's
Mm.
been very hard to deal with just because like anyone who has dementia, well, who has had a family member with dementia knows just how like literally deteriorating it is, and how like you just see your family member like lose their self literally, and it's really sad because like lately visiting him, he's become more soft spoken and become like he's just had a hard time
Mm.
speaking, and it's saddening to say the very least.
Hmm.
But aside from that, my grandmother was also a very affluent teacher. She taught a lot in public schools, and my auntie, she works not only she's worked not only as a lawyer for T-Mobile, but she's also working at Microsoft um now. um so we take pride in our culture for those reasons, because like we carry that like as an achievement that like you can do this like no matter what your identity is. We do I do feel like some of that gets to like, not to call them out, sorry to hear anybody if any of you find this and listen. I don't think they will, I doubt it. um uh it gets a little to the head sometimes, like, not it's not a bad thing, but I do think that like using like your blackness as like I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I'm sorry. I'm like the my is it's just hard it's hard to say because like they're very affluent people and I feel like that more comes in hand with their affluentialness because like well obviously
Hmm.
because like when you've made it, you know, you're proud of that and all that. You are very like you want to like show the world your success, but like when it comes to like family and everything and all that, you know, like and becoming understanding like values and everything that gets in the way sometimes. Um like my cousins on my uh auntie's side, they also have ADHD. And you know, my cousin he has like he's been struggling with it a little bit, and my auntie doesn't really necessarily understand it, and sometimes we'll get frustrated about it.
Hmm.
Um, and like I think that's also a thing that's not discussed as much, like when it comes to mental health. That like it's not really like it's not a thing that was imagined in you know people of color. And I remember like literally just yesterday discovering that the creator of the Myers-Briggs test wrote about how wrote about a family who was black who was shamed being black or something like that. And that upset me because, like,
Huh.
you know, I know all my professors were just like, so Myers-Briggs this, Myers-Briggs that. And it's like, how much of like all of this is rooted in racism too? Because it's like,
Hmm.
not only does that affect like, you know, scientists and people who like psychologists who also like study this stuff, but um it affects, you know, people of color too. Like it's not talked about. It's not like a center of topic too. And I think that's also and that's where I think like the um the tides kind of change in that kind of agreement with my family because um which is I guess what I was trying to say earlier because you know, black culture isn't necessarily still confident with accepting um not only mental health but like LGBTQ topics and everything too. Like
Yeah.
I'm obviously not a spokesperson or not the only spokesperson for this and shouldn't be the only spokesperson for this. Um, but I mean, like, it's still a very taboo topic and it shouldn't be because, like, if this is supposed to be a more globalized thing, then these topics also need to happen in these groups too.
Well, it's an interesting thing. Speaking from the outside on this one, of course. Uh, but seeing it and doing some seeing some analysis on it. Like I'll say black community. I'll go with black community.
Yeah, that's fine.
Very. There's a lot of like a Baptist starting for a lot of them, and
Hmm.
it's despite voting overwhelmingly Democrat. It's a very conservative community because of like Baptists and things like that.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so it's interesting how that works.
when I was a 12, I believe I was baptized and everything. So
Hmm.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. Um, there was actually an interesting read we talked about last quarter. I keep referring to last quarter. Sorry.
If it's good.
Um, but I forgot what it was called. But it was centered around how homosexual black men would use this thing. I think it was called the down low.
Okay.
Um,
Yep. All right.
is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah. I know this. Okay.
yeah, and how like that would be, you know, the way they would hide their you know, their sexuality.
Hmm.
And, you know, once this got out more, like when that one guy came on to Oprah, I forgot his name, but I think we all know when that one thing, um, and addressed the AIDS epidemic and everything, and how, you know, your husband may be gay and you may not, and have AIDS, you may not know it. And that just like made a huge turnaround for the black community in terms of that. Because, like, it just created this internalized hate that not only was focused on like, gay and LGBTQ, but like with like with just basic men and women too. Like just men or women were being disrespected, but they were also disrespecting their men. And it was all internalized hate that came from a generalized, um, westernized theory. Because, like, just because AIDS was booming at the time.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like, I feel like it's kind of like what the war on drugs has done to like incarnation now. Like, that's kind of like the mirror of what the down low has done for the black community in terms of like feminization, gay rights and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Because, like, it's just like an internalized idea of what we think is this community when it comes to these topics. Like with the war on drugs, it's like thinking that everybody who like raps or like seems dangerous or like does drugs and everything is gonna need to be incarcerated. Um, I'm actually taking a course right now in it's called rap and let me take a look. I'm sorry. Um, something with rap music identity and culture.
Okay.
Um, and we've talked about a lot of like how rap artists and specifically black artists, how they've been incarcerated just for like their lyrics, like just for like their songs that they write about because of like, like everybody knows that like rap does have darker undertones in their lyrics. And it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's true. But that doesn't mean like when you reflect on like stuff like the art versus the artist, that doesn't mean that this artist like goes with those what's the word morals.
Hmm.
Like a lot of the times the roots of those came from being written about like escapism, like because of where the origins of like rap and hip hop originated. um because they came up from like upstate New York and everything, um that area. And at the time in the 70s, um those areas were being severely defunded. And so a lot of those areas and neighborhoods, especially with like migrants, not only just like black people, but like Asian Americans and Jewish people, were in poverty. And so
Hmm.
not only that, but like programs were especially defunded, like social services and like security and all that, they were, non existent. And so that's why, quote unquote, those areas are more dangerous. But it's not that they're more dangerous, is that there's less protection there.
Hmm.
And that rule still applies today. It's like when people talk about like, oh, the hood and everything, like it's not the hood, it's just less protected. Like, please stop saying that.
One thing with Myers Briggs,
Hmm.
uh, part of it, this becomes a kind of a. There is some. It's a hard thing to do, but there is trying to separate the artist from the art sometimes. And like there's morality to it, and there's also, but it's worth analyzing to see whether it really is, it does have a racial tinge to it. But if there is still worth to it, then it should still be maintained, even if the creator is not great.
Hmm.
There, because there is a push by some, not a lot, but by some, that they feel like some of the like the scientific method should be done away with, and we should do something different because it came out of like the Enlightenment period, which was a bunch of racist white dudes.
Hmm.
But the scientific method is gold. It's solid. Why would you just cause do that?
Yeah, I agree. Like, knowing with what I've worked with in research psychology, I mean, just like in science alone, I feel like this is like a type of method that when even if it was theorized by different people, it would boil to the same thing.
Hmm.
Just because, like, philosophically, that's a lot of the reason and like a lot of the formation that we make when it comes to like asking questions and like formulating ideas, like literally just if then because. Um, I do think it's important to know like the roots of everything. Like I do think it's important to know that like, and like in your example, since this came from enlightenment, that was also a time where it was more westernized and colonialization was happening, so that's something to keep in mind. However, like that goes to say with that just because that happened doesn't mean we should eradicate it because that happened. Um, I think a lot of people who get mad at things that were built either around or on racism or like sensitive topics um think that eradication is a good thing. And to some degrees it is, but eradication also eliminates the history behind it.
Hmm.
And I always think about that one time when Warner Brothers displayed a lot of their older cartoons, but they had a slide card in front of it saying that these kids or these cartoons were made at the time period where this was thought deemed as okay. And we were displaying this to assure you not that these are okay still, but at the time that they were, and that they are no longer considered okay. Um, and I think that's important to note when it comes to like erasure of roots, because if we didn't know about history, like if we don't focus on it, then we're doomed to repeat it.
Hmm.
So, um,
Yeah.
if it's not taught and if it's not like critiqued or worked on and everything, obviously it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
Um, so that's where I fall on that kind of thing.
That is something I find, but I don't agree with from the left side of things. Is yeah, eradication. They're all about just get rid of it all.
Mhm.
And well, then we don't know it existed. Then we will repeat because history, yeah, can be quite deterministic.
Mhm.
Because I think Disney's doing the same thing where they are here's a bump like for like Dumbo. They were like here's a just let you know there's some racist ass birds in this thing,
Mhm.
and I think like Fantasia also
Mhm.
has that character, and so they're
Yes.
like yeah just there's some things here. I don't know if they did that to. They might have done it to Princess and the Frog. But I'm not sure. I'd have to check.
I think Princess's Frog was fine because I don't think there was any like racial caricatures. I think Princess and the Frog was made early enough for those to not be as
Hmm.
existent
I wonder.
at that time.
I wonder about
Oh,
that
go on.
just because like corporate because the tone deaf thing that was done, like not Disney, but the tone deaf thing that was done was getting rid of Gone with the Wind. Like no one was watching that anyway for the most part.
Mhm.
But you could have I think yeah, putting like this is a part of history, just putting a bump here is like doesn't just having it doesn't mean we endorse it kind of thing. I think is a better way to put it.
Mhm.
I'll do another
And
scientific. Whoop,
oh, I was just gonna say I actually had never seen Gone with the Wind, so
same.
I don't really know what it's about.
Oh, it's like slavery times, and it's kind of
Oh, I see.
like there's a mammy character,
Mhm.
and let's see how to put it. I don't think it just. I think she's like the nice slave owner. So I'm like I can't remember anymore because I've not seen it either. I just remember people telling me about it. Like
Mhm.
people just don't watch that movie anymore.
Yeah, like there's new media to be consumed, so.
Like another example of this is the science community had to make a choice after
Mhm.
World War II. So I won't go into detail, but the Nazis did some effed up stuff to the Jews in the name
Mhm.
of science. They did some things,
Mhm.
very horrible things. And the scientist community question was, do we seal this or do we use it? That was the question. And at the end of the day, they decided we'll use it because it gives meaning to the lives that were lost.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Exactly.
it was a lot of pain studies. I'll go that far with it. And so we learned a lot about pain tolerance, and so it was extremely helpful.
Mhm.
It would have been it would have been bad for us in general. I think just in some science if we just sealed that stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, because like it just like again, it just reflects history, and like if it weren't like we would just suspect that for it to not have happened if it was eradicated. Therefore, who knows how we would have repeated it.
Hmm.
Um, like I remember there's also I think it was done at the same time. I'm not quite sure, but there was another scientist who did the same things on black people, more specifically black women, because they operated on them without anesthesia.
Ugh.
Uh, because they believed they wouldn't feel as much or if any at all any pain at all, um, which was obviously
Wow.
untrue.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it's
Ugh.
I believe there was a statue of him somewhere. I don't remember
What?
where. Yeah,
Ugh.
yeah. Um, I think it's New York. I'm not
Mm.
certain on that, but yeah. Another interesting thing kind of related to that I just recently learned is how so in your liver you have a certain like pH level, I believe,
Hmm.
or something of the sort that is like determines how well your liver is. And I forgot how this was determined, but in the older days with black people, it was determined that there was a certain like numeric division that applied to that pH level with black people in their liver. And so that would affect greatly, like, and still does to this day for some reason, how like liver transplants would work, how like um just anything related to the liver, like health with the liver would be handled with black people. Like, and it was the number was so significant that like it would make like even an intolerant amount of pain seem like nothing when you multiplied it with this factor. And so it made it like nearly impossible for black people to get liver transplants, and ultimately a lot of them would die because of it.
Wow.
So, and it's still like a common factor, I think. Like I literally got this factoid from like TikTok. Um
Oh, Jesus.
so it's really like kind of resuming what we or connecting what we talked about earlier with like reform versus abolish. It's like a lot of these things, like so many of these things are rooted like with beliefs that would just that aren't that don't matter or never mattered in the first place anymore. So
Hmm.
it's just a lot.
Or it's just they don't make any sense.
Yeah, like they
Oh,
don't.
just that's
It's
horrifying, honestly. Just ugh.
very horrifying, and it's like my mom has like pushed for my mom and also some other members of my family have suggested not you enter the medical field since you're going to be studying psychology, and I'm like, no. One thing because I do get squeamish,
Mhm.
to some degrees, but another thing is just because like even though I would love to, like I do think it's important that there's more like black doctors and just people of color doctors. Um, it just it's not something that I would want to put up with.
Yeah,
Like for myself, like it's a very selfish thing, but I mean, like that's just how I would prefer it to be with me. Because even though I do agree with that factor, I also agree that there's needs to be more black people in other like careers in general, like in in psychology, in animation, and like and basically all the careers that I've been kind of like discussing.
oh for sure. Like with any of them. That's that's an annoying thing. With everything's just white.
Yeah, yeah.
What's also weird is let's go back to animation.
Mm.
When people draw black characters and people are like, well, what's with this? What are you doing? Doing? They'll be like, why are you drawing black characters? And it's like,
Uh,
I'm drawing what I want to see. like like you got to make the change you want to see, so you got to draw characters. But like people just be mad you're making black characters instead of like white characters. Like, come on.
my favorite response is when people would like take like a random black character that probably everybody will know of, and like, okay, well, what if I drew this character white? How would you feel about that? And it's just like, well, first of all, that's racist
Hmm.
because well, ultimately, black blackness is like an identity that is meant to like that hasn't been represented. Like for people that don't get why like people draw like their favorite characters darker or black or in a different race. It's because they were like they didn't see that representation of them,
Hmm.
and they just wanted to reimagine it on if it was, in their culture. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to reimagine something like one of the millions of white guys or white chicks that among millions of other characters that are out there, wanting to see one of them black for like 10 seconds. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I would like to assure everybody that your favorite old favorite character is still there. They're still white. You don't have to raise a fuss over it.
Well, like in media, like that's the reason why Spider-Man has been such a big character in the black community. Is he's wearing a mask? Anyone can be Spider-Man,
Hmm.
and because that's what I've always known from my black friends. Were like, yeah, they love Spider-Man because they can dress up as a superhero. They
Hmm.
don't have to worry about race with this stuff.
Hmm.
Because it gets into a weird space with people where they're like, if you're not the right skin color, it's like, are you kidding me? If you're
Yeah.
the number of white people doing Japanese characters because anime, and just like, come on, just let people be what they want to be.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know, arts. There's a lot of weirdness in when it comes to art, and especially with just coloring, like Pokemon with Nessa.
I was gonna mention that.
So much chaos when it came to Nessa. I just,
It's like, and it just like shows that like it's not even about like people who want to like see more diversification. It's just about the system itself. Like, and it's just about the racism that's even rooted in the art community and like in the design community. Because in reality, there's not that many like Game Freak is was top tier with the designs for this Pokemon game. Like, there was a lot of dark characters, and I think that was a really good thing and a really good feature. Um, and just like how people turned that into like a joke and like not only Westerners but Easterners too. Like, I that's something I'd also like to talk about, and how like there were certain Eastern artists like that were also drawing Nessa White to like troll or whatever and everything. When in reality, there's a big colorist issue there too.
oh yeah, if we think the West is racist, ooh, the East is extremely racist as well. You can just take India. Like, the whiter your skin, the more pure you are to them, which is so weird.
Hmm. My one of my roommates for my first year of college, she went to she would travel a lot and she would go to like South Korea a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and she's in particular, she is Asian. I forgot what her ethnicity is specifically. I believe Filipino. I'm I'm not certain. Um,
But what food
but
did
she
she
was
eat? That could tell you some clue.
kimchi.
Okay, so she really likes Korean stuff. All right, okay.
Yeah, like
But
she had a huge jar of kimchi. She
she's
had.
Korea boo then?
I wouldn't say she's a Koreaboo because she wasn't like obsessed with it, but
But she just likes Korean. Okay.
yeah, but she would travel a lot to like Malaysia, Thailand, Korea, and like when she would go to Korea though, like she's particularly dark Asian. She has a particularly darker skin for and
Filipinos usually one of the darker skinned ones.
yeah, that's why I think she was Filipino.
Hmm.
I'm still not. I just can't remember. Um, but like yeah, so she would when she would travel there though, get she would get like people from there like looking at her skin weirdly, or like even be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, your skin's so dark. It's so like just fetishization and everything basically of it." And it's
Yeah.
like people think that that's just like um just a Western issue. No, it's a global issue. I assure you, it's not just us.
Yeah.
Um.
Korea is weird in that they have a very strong what's the word here? Plastic surgery culture.
Mhm.
Like, it's if you haven't had any work done, then you're not normal. It's so weird.
Mhm. Like I know some of this because of Steph actually.
Hmm.
Because she well, for one thing, I know like everybody who knows her knows that she loves K-pop, but
Got her own
you know,
section.
but she also just like she's talked about how like how K-pop is like more so used as like a marketing tool.
Hmm.
Because of and like with that, it's like they're uh like the pop stars that are there are usually fair skinned and like they do have like work done or like they have makeup artists and everything. And like as far as I know, there hasn't really been any like blue like specifically like darker skinned K-pop or celebrities that I've noticed. Um
Hmm.
but I mean that goes to show that it's still more specifically focused on like fair skin. Um but yeah. Um even with this quarter there was a documentary we watched called The Illusionist where they talked about how with body appearance um like you said, how in places like India and like some Eastern Asian cultures where skin whitening is like favorable.
Yeah, it's a $1 billion business in India itself.
Hmm.
It is it's a bit much. It's a bit much. Well, whereas China and Japan are both very. If you're not one of us, you ain't much. As
Mm.
progressive as we want to think Japan is very conservative, extremely conservative.
Hmm.
So it's unfortunate. We just all really like anime. That's our problem. Uh, moving over to. I don't know if I want to ask this. Okay, so how much into gaming are you?
I'd say like I'm a fair middle ground. Like when I got that Xbox that I told you about in like when I was like 6 or 7, um, we had a lot of time playing it. Like Ask Marina, we she would always come over. She and our friends would come over to my place. We'd play Left 4 Dead all day.
Nice.
We'd play Sonic games and like other game like I forgot, maybe like Portal or something like that. We were definitely playing a lot of those back in the day. Um, so I'd say like a good chunk of my life has been devoted to gaming. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm like the most knowledgeable person with gaming.
Mm,
Like obviously I don't really pay attention to most like big title games or like um most of the time like I usually pick up something after the hype's died down for it.
okay.
Um like that's just been a thing I noticed with myself in particular. But I'd say it's a good part of my life. It's a big part of my life.
Yeah, you were really into Splatoon at the time when it came out, wasn't it?
Ooh. Yes, I was. That's when I first just got my Switch. And I would not stop playing. It was really fun. Um, I still think it's fun. I haven't played it in a little bit, and I know that there's supposed to be like another Splatfest coming up, so might take up on that. But yeah, lately I've been playing actually the new Pokemon game. It was what I was playing right before this.
Hmm.
Um a little bit of Animal Crossing. Not as much as when the hype was, but
Oh yeah.
so and so. But yeah.
Okay.
Hmm,
Now
pardon me.
I want to ask this question. I'll ask it.
Sure.
Why is the Sonic community so crazy?
I had a feeling it was that.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's like it's a really complicated question.
Mhm.
Um, Part of it is because I've had experience with it because either I was someone who caused drama or was involved with it. Because I will not like cut corners around it. I was a bit of a little smartass when I was first into it.
Hmm.
Um, Part of that I feel like is blamed by my undiagnosed ADHD. But other part was just because I was a little smartass. Um, I like I have a feeling it just happens to do with just like communication. With a lot of fandoms and like issues and it comes to this, like when it comes to like issues of like drama, like character design stealing, or like who dislikes who and all that stuff. Um, it all like when it boils down to it, it comes to communication, and I can say with confidence that I feel like that's something I've gotten better with because of reflecting from my past. Like something to remember that is important for anybody to take in is that your mistakes aren't worth it as long as you like learn from them.
Mm.
Um, your mistakes. I'm trying to make sure I worded that correctly. Oh, your mistakes are worth it as long as you learn from them.
Mhm.
And I think that's important because a lot of the stuff that I was involved with, trigger warning for somewhat sexual assault. I won't get into it, but like it consists with that. Um, a lot of that consisted of like confusion with myself and like manipulation, gaslighting, of course, from the perpetrator at hand, but also just like lack of communication from like other people. Like I didn't tell people exactly what happened with me until like now. Like probably this year was the most open I've been able to vent about it, and I still get like shaky about it. But
Mm.
like when it comes to like people having arguments and everything and like plot posts and everything like that, it's like you shouldn't like I do agree that like, call out culture is like I do think that certain degrees of call out culture are important because it recognizes people who are doing wrong by either like being abusive, being mean, being, predators or whatever bad things that they're doing.
Yeah.
Um But I think a lot of that is confused with the people who are involved because they were involved, and that, like, is where the communication diverges. And so when we talk about the Sonic community, a lot of the, incidents that I've been involved with, when I look back at them, they do involve that divergence of communication because a lot of them could have been solved if things were communicated better. And, obviously, that can't be redone now, like, whatever happens, happens.
Mm.
But in general, for like fandoms and like in general to want to like cooperate better and like resonate with each other better, there needs to be more like communication. There needs to be more like humanitarianism with each other because if we keep like just trying to like hear things, because like not gonna lie, there's like a lot of people in these fandoms, not just solely Sonic, like quite a few in Sonic, but not just it, that have, like, adults that act like they're still in high school. And I think the
Ooh.
reason and, like, while that is a bad thing that, shouldn't be ignored, I think the reason for that is because, like, they never got this kind of satisfaction or, like, unity or, like, just acceptance in general of being in the community like they did in high school because a lot of the time kids like these were bullied. And like with these interests were made fun of, they were isolated, they had mental health issues, or they had like family problems or something like that. I'm just pulling straws here, and like
Mhm.
maybe some people didn't, but a lot of the people that I have encountered with these issues have had those issues or had these problems like at some point in their lives. And kind of referring to what I was talking about earlier, that's why I think it's important to have these like health discussions, more localized and more like, talked about because if they're not, then, again, it's going to lead to a misunderstanding of each other, therefore lack of communication and therefore, more of this drama. So that's where I think I feel about like why is it so crazy? Um Because not gonna lie, there is also just people who don't want to change, and that's more of their egotistical, standards
Mm. Yeah.
too. And, like, that is where it comes to a problem because if you're thinking that there's nothing wrong with yourself, then, you know, that's the problem in itself. You think that there's nothing wrong with yourself. And with certain degrees, obviously that's true, but like when you're the center of a problem or like involved in that in a general thing, you need to think more of like, you know, how you're not bad or how you're not good. Like thinking of those just like like binary structures in like a situation like that is not good. It's not healthy because again, it just sets binaries to bad and good.
Hmm.
You need to think about is being constructive and more like more intersectional with like who's involved, what's happening, what's being discussed, and why is it happening and all that.
I wonder if branching off a little bit, because
Mhm.
it makes me think about it. If well, social media has done some good, but also bad. But I wonder how much it has aggressively utilized individualism, but also us versus them mentality.
Mhm.
I wonder,
I Oh, go ahead.
is it good at the end of the day? Social
So
media.
like social media is good, but the way the media is like portrayed it and like made it like localized is bad.
Hmm.
Because like I think Twitter definitely is one of those instances where like it's purposely made this way for like it to be like this because if it wasn't, then it probably wouldn't be used to the degree that the developers would want it to. Or and like it ironically, like again, when it boils down to it just is about like money and like
Yeah,
stocks
yeah.
because a lot of the things that people do on like these websites are are influenced from external things like money or like motivations and like stuff like that. Like sometimes it's not even conventional, just like because they felt like it. um and so we are human beings are very social creatures. Like we it's in our blood, it's in like our like makeup. um we we can't really survive without social interaction,
Hmm?
whether that is physical or in this case on the internet.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like if we caused this or if we didn't directly cause it, but we were influenced by it, I'd say. Like
Hmm.
because we became like so normalized with like allowing like he said she said stuff or like something like that to a degree where like call out posts and stuff like that that are actually focused on like awareness of like a certain person and their behavior seem like drama. And that's why people like say call out culture is bad because
Hmm.
it originated technically from from this kind of thing, but it just evolved into something else.
Yeah, but I think when it comes to color culture, the problem is people suck. So
Yeah.
there are times when the call out is 100% justifiable.
Mhm.
Like it was the right thing when it happened with that. It was right when it happened with Smash. Just
Mhm.
oh, that Smash one was nuts. But when it happens, it happens because something finally boiled over. There was
Mhm.
finally enough that it finally came out. Like hell, the whole just the Me Too movement was a lot of canceling because these were really bad dudes who should be canceled.
Mhm.
But then it's also sometimes callouts are wielded like a cudgel and just used as a weapon instead of that, and that's because people suck. They're using it not for what it for not for the good it can do, but just for the destruction it can do, which is very unfortunate.
Mhm.
Like, because it could be like, I just disagree with this person, so I want to cancel them, which is not great. When it gets petty, it just cheapens what it can do
Mhm.
instead of taking down people who really should get taken down. For like Weinstein should have
Mhm.
been taken down. The abusers in the Smash community, thankfully, yeah, they've come to light, so that's good. Just things like that.
Mhm.
Those are the correct way for call out.
Mhm.
I'm just happy
I
that
agree.
the Kirby community has nothing like this.
God, I would be like, if anything happened to the Kirby community, like, just,
It's a very
Uh,
protective community because it is a very childlike.
yeah.
Because Kirby's a child, so it's a lot of the older adults are very protective of the younger ones,
Mhm.
where they're like, yeah, just make sure you don't share certain information, this and that. Like, because I think it's seeing what other communities have done. The Kirby community tries to protect itself
Yeah.
because it would really hurt if some scandal came out of Kirby community. It's the same thing with more aggressively the Animal Crossing community is way more
Mhm.
aggressive about being nice. If people are
Yeah.
mean, they get piled on.
Mhm. I don't know, like, a lot what I've noticed, like it was crazy, like, the first couple months after, Horizons got released out because people were, like, bullying about, like, certain animal like, villagers being ugly and, like, certain like, people would, like, get off at that. People were, like I remember one time when I was, like, kinda invested in turnips, and there was that turnip exchange website, and I went to someone's island for that, they, um and they were actually scamming, and so I was just like, "Oh,
Wow.
okay. That fuck your bye."
Wow.
Um, but, like, there was also, like, people, like, mad about, like, um, people copying designs or, like, having islands that look too similar to theirs, and I think a lot of that has to do with, and, like, that kinda like, can be related to, the art community and, like, other
Yeah.
fandoms that, like, are focused on, like, art, like, in the sense the Sonic community because, like, people take pride in what they make, and they don't wanna be outdone by something that looks that or is the same as theirs, and, like, in one regard, that's totally understandable, but in the other regard, it's like, you know, it's just to have fun, and, like, in a more professional sense, when people, like, you know, take your idea for credit, obviously that should be like, "No,
Yeah.
this is my design, get away." Um oh, excuse me. Um, but, like, when it comes to, like, the Animal Crossing community, it's like, "Hey, you have brick that looks like mine. I'm gonna fight you for it." Um, 'Cause, like, that one you're definitely much more limited to, um, creations, I'd say.
Yeah. It's weird. Okay, art has some weirdness. Like, there's only so many colors and combinations you can do with some things, and just there's gonna be overlap. Definitely
Yeah.
gonna happen. I like. It's weird. Like OCs.
Mhm.
Let's just go with just Moby and OCs. Like, there's only so many animals you can do. There's only so many colors you can do. Eventually, someone's gonna have the same thing. I figure, and
With, like,
I don't know.
I do agree that, like, with the idea that, like, you know, what's the term? I just had it in my mind and it slipped. You know, the rule of, like, inspiration, like, eventually or, like, limited creativity, like, eventually someone has the same idea as you, because, like, I agree, like, most ideas, like, when it comes to, like, fandom or, like, an idea that's really finite, you are gonna have those, like, kinda run-ins, and, like, it's only natural. But, there has been, like obviously, if you're, like, gonna, like, take something that, like, looks very similar, like, if anything, like a copy, that's should be,
Oh, of course.
yeah, yeah. But there's been, like what was I gonna say? There okay, now I remember. There's, like, been discourse about, like more specifically in just art in general of, like, people, like, copying styles or, like, making styles look the same. It's like, listen, there's gonna be people who are influenced by you, and, like, while I do somewhat agree, disagree with the phrase imitation is a form of flattery, like, again, there's, like, certain boundaries you can push with that. Um, because in the end, like, it's art. Like, art is, like I think that, like, art in itself can be, um, infinite because there's so many levels that you can get
True.
with it. Um, and that, like, people who, uh, um sorry, I just saw a funny tweet. Uh, people who like make a big deal about people who have similar styles, like I feel like that should be like that shouldn't happen, or well, like not that it shouldn't happen, but like it shouldn't be as made up as a big deal as it is because I agree. Like it comes to that whole spite thing. Like you want to like be proud of your creation, you want to like see it do good and like be good with it, but at the same time, it's like again, people have so many, options, dude. Like, one of the rules about art is to break them. So, most people who have like been inspired by people and their styles go take that and break it anyway. At least what I've seen.
Yeah.
Or and also in like my experience cuz like there's definitely with my style, there's definitely been like many different artists that I've been inspired by and try to like emulate from their like styles. But like I also try to like make myself look or make my stuff look, like its own thing because I want to have like um my own distinct kind of recognizable uh
Hmm.
thing. And obviously like, there's definitely going to be styles that look similar. Like it's because I'm influenced by those styles that look similar. So there's no working around that. That'll just happen. But it's just breaking the rules and all that stuff.
Mhm. Like, look, no person is an island. Everyone's seen
Mhm,
drawings their whole life, so
mhm.
that's going to influence them in one way or shape or form. And just yeah, there's going to I to the little degrees. Yeah, there's everyone's got a different style, but there's going to be a lot of overlap as well. Hell, not all the manga in the world got drawn by one dude.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
a lot of people get really good at a specific style.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I got you, dude.
uh, yeah, you just you find your style, or other people like you. It's like you said, oh, that looks really cool, and then you just try to make it yourself and then that influences how you draw,
Yeah,
and that's you growing. Like you're just growing into whatever you're growing into.
yeah.
It'd be like I don't know, just same thing with music. Just saying like there's only so many ways you can play a chord.
Mhm,
I don't know. I I think as our age goes, it's more just what has influenced us if we can actually identify it.
mhm,
Like noting that, or just well, things have just everything we've done is just a combination of a bunch of things we've seen and learned and things like that.
mhm. Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's not the exact one to one, but just that's why saying like art commissions or prices. That's why they get bigger and bigger with time. It's like, oh, you're not paying for like the hours. You're also paying for the years.
Mhm,
It's like I think it was Van Gogh, or it might be another guy where he took like a year or 2 years to draw a cat or a duck,
mhm,
and then it's finally drawn. Is like it wasn't. They weren't just paying for like the hour it took to draw it. They paying for like the years it took to draw them.
mhm,
Or I remember there was a commission, and they're like, "Well, how much does this cost?" I'm like, "Why does it cost so much?" She's like, "You're paying for my entire life.
mhm.
My entire life is this
Yeah,
painting right here."
takes me back to the DeviantArt days when I was just, like, getting familiar with, commissions and, like, what those were, and I was just like, "I can get paid for doing art? Oh, awesome." But, like, really early on, my prices were, like it was, like, also delved with the point system that it had.
Hmm.
Um, they were, like, technically 25 cents. It was so
Wow.
crazy to look back at, and meanwhile, like, I've been, like, considering, reopening commissionings, since for one thing, the unemployment benefits are over, and, I'm not gonna lie, I don't really feel confident going out in the world and working right now.
Yeah.
Um, but, and also, just because I wanna work on more examples, for, like, portfolio reasons and just, like, in general. Um, but I'm considering revamping my prices to, like, probably around a higher range. Like, I feel nervous doing so because I know, like, with a fandom standard, most people don't have that much, and especially with a time like this where,
Yeah.
financial crisis basically everywhere,
Ooh.
I know that's, like, it's very, like, hard to have funds and all that, but same time, I'm also in need of funds. And like it's selfish to say because, it is, but it's also for my my you know living. Um,
Yeah.
and like art again is a luxury. Like people don't remember it as it was, but art is technically supposed to be like a luxury. And I feel like referring back to TV and art, that point system really screwed over with how people price things because of how
Hmm.
it was made. Um, because if it wasn't like that, like I feel like a lot of people would be pricing their stuff higher and like valuing their art more to that standard.
Hmm.
Um, because like even though like people like even if people don't want to like um price it that high, that doesn't make it that's still like when you for the people that do want to price it that high, it's not fair to them when you say that someone else's prices aren't the same or cheaper and all that.
Hmm.
So
It
yeah.
it gets really muddy when you start comparing artists' commission prices and stuff like that. It's not a great area.
Hmm.
Um, oh, random. I'll make this about myself a moment.
Go
Somebody
ahead.
wanted to commission me, and then the virus hit,
Yeah.
and then the virus
Oh
hit.
no.
So now they don't have money. I'm
Oh.
like, all right, well, it just blew me away when someone was willing to do it in the first place. Though I'm like, oh my god, somebody actually likes my art that much.
Well,
Whoa,
that
okay.
goes to show that, like, you know, no matter what your art is, like, okay, I know this is a very like privileged thing for me to say just because like I do have a little bit of a higher following count, but like, people will gravitate to art that they like and like
Mhm.
people that they want to support. Because ultimately like humans gravitate to wanting to do good to feel good. And so when they give to someone that they want to, enjoy the luxury of their art of and also support, like it just feels good.
Hmm.
Like, especially when it's someone like with this new age of so many independent creators, it's so good to like help and support each other just by like buying their luxuries and buying stuff that you would usually get at like a huge corporation, but instead can actually help like an individual person.
Yeah, it's a nice thing not having a middleman there and all that stuff.
Hmm.
It's also just because I've seen it. I've seen a circle of artists basically pass the same 100 across each other.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's that's
Ooh,
the friend group right there.
yeah, it's ooh, like I, the whole thing with the virus. It's everyone should be don't want it necessarily, but everyone should be a little stressed out about just how the economy's doing right now. It's not great.
Yeah, and I feel like everything is just gonna like nothing's gonna be the same after this. I can totally like guarantee that like nothing will feel the same, be the same. Like even if nothing systemically like changes because our government is stupid, there
Yeah,
nothing is going to feel the same. Like
yeah.
we are not going to say feel the same way about each other, about our government, about like everything because of how universal this whole thing has impacted.
It, it's so hard to. We won't know until we run into it, honestly, because we've seen the Emperor's clothes in so many things. Because like the virus laid us bare. It
Hmm.
showed us a lot of things like where can we get the money for this and that, and then we're just pumping money into these other things like well we see that we could have had that money for these programs a long time ago, because if we
Hmm.
need money we can get it. We've definitely proven we can just get that money. And just the double standards of a lot of things,
Hmm.
especially double standards of when it comes to how much money people have, like with school, the double
Hmm.
standards towards the people who can afford to have uh, who can afford to work and have their kids be watched, and those who can't afford that, like they have to choose between their job and their kid. And just
Hmm.
like the big one was another was just anyone working minimum wage can't afford rent anywhere in the country.
Yep.
That that should be well. Okay, why can't we fix that? Why aren't we fixing that?
I think one of my favorite things that has erupted, well, not favorite, but like
Mhm.
my favorite ironic thing that has erupted from those discussions is how like people would like go after the type of people who go after the people who were like sign up for the unemployment benefits and be like, why are they making $600 or more a month? or a week by just sitting at home, and it's like, well, you see, that would be the same amount that you would get if you had a $15 an hour minimum wage job for working 40 hours a week. But working 40 hours a week is also in itself kind of a unrealistic standard because in reality, like people shouldn't have to work that much in order to like afford basic things like their housing or their food or their, you know, funding for their children and stuff like that because it's like, it's been proven that literally billionaires do that all the time
Yeah.
and earn more. Like Jeff Bezos is probably earning like he probably earned like an extra $1 billion within the duration of this whole podcast.
Yeah, he's a couple things. One is billionaires feel like the dragons of our age.
Yeah.
Another one is it's amazing. Like when it comes to politics, it's amazing how counter to self people are. In that
Mm.
a lot of the right is so anti-socialist, and yet the billionaires get a lot of socialist programs. Like they
Yeah.
get a lot of socialist treatment. It's really weird.
It's like it's just education.
Yeah, and that in itself, that was a big thing for me with BLM and ACAB and all that was when they actually pointed out the budgets to the police and the budgets to schooling. I'm like, that is a very big difference.
Yeah, like is astronomically different. I
Yeah.
forgot. I believe, thankfully for Seattle, specifically, they cut the funding in half for
Wow.
Seattle PD. That was just recently announced. I believe that was announced a couple of days ago.
Okay.
But not only that, but they also announced that they will not uh, allow police to handle like uh,
Wellness checks
infiltrations
or
with
oh no.
huh?
I thought it was gonna be wellness checks, but okay,
Oh, I'm not sure about that one.
okay.
But interference with the homeless population.
Oh.
Uh, because in particular, Washington does have a pretty high homeless population, but it's mainly because of Mr. Amazon, um, and how many like people like because he made his business here up in Washington. How like that raised the rents of everything because more people were coming to start working with Amazon,
Mhm.
which led to like again an increase in rent and mortgage and just down payments and all that. Therefore, more homeless people than we had. Like
Ooh.
you could afford like a two-bedroom house where I live, or two-bedroom house, two-bedroom apartment, for like $1,200 where I live, like a couple years ago, and now it's
Oh.
like on average around 2K, the average. It's like, how is that?
Wow,
uh,
1200 sounds amazing.
Oh yeah, that's right. I keep forgetting that you live in California, so it's even like compared to the rest of the world, we live in probably the most expensive places in the country,
And
both of us.
yeah, the funny thing with that is, like, I live in San Diego,
Mm.
and I've gotten job offers in San Francisco. I'm like, oh hell no, those prices. Because
Oh,
I can make 120K in San Francisco right now, and it ain't gonna
mm.
do shit. It ain't gonna do anything
Yeah,
in that place. It is ridiculous.
that is just, ugh.
It's I. This is what came like a theory came out, and I'm actually curious if it will happen. Is the cat came out of the bag where a bunch of businesses like, yeah, we can do satellite work because it's just an office job. You can work from home.
Yeah.
So the curiosity is if this gets normalized enough, we might have more like satellite towns so that
Mm,
it would hopefully bring rent down because everything's more spread out instead of just everyone's just in the one big town.
right, and, like, I think that's cool, because, like you said, like, that would help astronomically, and plus, it just helps, like it makes a lot more sense, like, if you can do your job at home, then what's the point of, like, offices being built and all that stuff when we can use that for building more, like, homeless shelters or just, like, homes in general?
It comes down to,
Um,
I think, people just don't trust people.
yeah, and, like, that's very reasonable because like, I get that, but at the same time, it's like if there's like been a boom of independent work like within
Yeah,
the past 5 years, then I think you can trust people to work home with like the job that they already like commute to.
definitely true. Like, oh god, commutes are just such a waste of life.
my mom, she currently commutes to Seattle right now for her work because they, even though they've been making it kind of differently because of the whole outbreak, um, she like at the first part of this outbreak, she was doing like some of this at home, and I'm just like, why don't they just make you stay home the whole time then?
Yeah.
Like, if you guys can do all this at home, then why don't they just keep you doing it there? And like, I understand that like with certain limitations that do connect to neurological aspects where people need help and like they can't do it on their own.
Mhm.
That do come in hand. But like, who's to say that they can't just like increase the mobility for that help to be, initiated too?
Like I know there's also a social aspect to it because we are social
Hmm.
creatures again. Like Japan or South Korea, one of them they did a test. They're like, all right, 500 people. Oh, they had like 1,000 people volunteer, and they picked 500 of them,
Hmm.
and they had them work from home, and just to test how this would go. After a year of that, they asked, "Hey, if you want to stay at home, you can. Do you want to stay at home, or do you want to come back to the office?" And straight up, like 240 were like, "I want to go back to the office."
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
they found just down the line, they're like, "All right, well, some people want it, some people do."
Yeah, and it's like I can understand why that's like such a down the middle like experience because like more people, it's just all is dependent on how people learn too. Like some people are
Yeah,
better at like some people are natural born learners and some people do need that extra help. Um so I get that. However, I think like but with like right now, I think that like that can be made easier for like people who aren't as like either asymptomatic or have immunocompromised systems, for them to like go to the physical place while people who do stay home and all that work. So they're not
yeah.
like feeling like deprived of their job or everything.
It'd just be great in general. A lot of these jobs just at home, and well, another thing that got laid bare is just who's more important right now when it comes to work. Is it the billionaires? Not really. We're relying on grocers, we're relying on truckers, we're relying on the lower paid people to keep things going, and it just makes me feel like yeah, people should get paid more in general.
Mm,
They just bring it up again. Just minimum wage can't afford rent anywhere. Are you kidding me? Bring that sucker
it's
up then, or bring the rent
like
down. One or the other.
I definitely feel like rent should to be brought down because they're just
Mm-hmm.
gonna make the excuse that like every time minimum wage goes up, so does everything else.
Good point.
And so it's definitely like I feel like because I know with a lot of the rest of the country, their minimum wages are on average like $8 to $10. Like here in Washington, the minimum wage is very high.
Mm.
Um, in Seattle, it's $15 an hour. Where I am, it's 13.50. Um, and even so, like you still have to work like
12 here.
couple. Huh?
It's 12 here. I just checked.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
But even oh, you're fine. Um, but even so, you still have to like work exponential amount of hours to even like pay rent down here. Like it's I've been like in particular looking at rent just because like I've been interested in possibly either getting a new apartment or and now in this case possibly buying a townhome or something. Um and just it's insane. Like a lot of the places in downtown Seattle naturally are like close to $1 million for
Oof.
houses and townhomes.
Oof.
Um so I'm just like maybe I'll save that down the road. But with apartments it's still like a painful average of like 2K for these apartments. It's like it's insane. It's just like why is this still a thing? Why is this a thing?
Yeah, like there's a lot of apartments that they're basically house payments.
Yeah,
The only reason why you can't do the house is because we got to do that big down payment at the start. Is the problem.
exactly.
And just not mean the rent, just so the frustration of landlords who want to kick people out right now. Are you kidding me? That's just cruelty.
Yeah.
They're not. You're not going to get anyone replacing them.
Hmm.
I think we've covered a good amount. This has been an amazing podcast, in my opinion. I thought it was
I
really good.
agree.
And I'm sure we could talk even more, but we can save that for another time. If you want to come back, that
Yeah.
is.
Oh yeah, I'd love to, dude. Just tell me whatever, and I'll be like, I'll talk about anything.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
But
well,
thank you for again for having me on here.
so we'll talk again in the future. So let's see here. Where can people find you?
If you want, I can link you my links. I only have like two. But primarily my Twitter and my Instagram. Um, but my Twitter is just underneath my same name, Smidg3n. My Instagram is also, but there's just two underscores in the front and the back. So
Okay.
I'll link you those.
And then there's your portfolio,
Oh
which
yeah,
I'll put
that's
that
linked on
link.
my. Yay! Thank you.
Put that link in the YouTube description. They can also find it on your Twitter, your portfolio. So
Yes, sir.
that as
There you go.
well. Let's see here. Okay. Yep. All right. Good, 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 good. So, heading out, is there anything you want to shout out as we get out of here?
Wear your mask. For the love of God.
Yeah?
Um. If you can, attend your local protests or support Black creators or Black businesses or Black anything. Uh, Gay rights.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
So, this has been basically a podcast with Smidg3n. And next time, I have no idea who I'm getting next. We'll see when that happens. Thank you everyone for watching, and if you found this interesting, then share it. Just share it. Forget it. Whether you liked it or not, just share the dang thing. I want to be more popular. I want more friends. This was good. I thought this was a really good episode. That's all I really think it was. So yeah. So it's been a basically podcast. I have fun. Hope you have fun watching and listening. That's what's all about, isn't it? Having fun. Thanks for coming by, and see you next time. You can say bye.
Oh, bye.